welcome to today's event. My name is Mona Lisa Earle, and I lead on the training, induction, and supervision for the volunteer coaches in BASW's Social Work Professional Support Service. I'm also a qualified social worker with many years of experience in the profession. But before we begin, I want to share just a bit of background about the service. The Social Work Professional Support Service was launched shortly after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. I believe that was May of 2020. And the purpose of establishing this program was to offer peer coaching support to social workers who were impacted either directly or indirectly by the pandemic. This service is delivered by volunteer coaches from across the UK, 4 of whom you'll be able to see here today on your screen, but again, from across the UK. And all of our volunteer coaches are experienced social workers. So that's where the peer coaching comes in. These are your peers. We are your peers, your social work peers. It's now coming on to just about 2 years since the launch of the Social Work Professional Support Service, and the experiences shared with us by our professional social work peers have changed from a mostly exclusive focus on pandemic-related issues to broader workplace and personal issues, some of which we will be discussing here today. So really, our volunteer coaches hear all manner of issues when we are talking to our social work peers in the service. As you hopefully can see from the screen, the topic that we're going to be exploring today is about the power of peer-to-peer support and reflecting on the importance of caring for those who care for others. And we know that's what social work is, and that's what we do, is we go to work every day, and our job is to really care for others and contain that anxiety and that trauma. So our coaches will be talking about that today. And again, we will be taking questions from the audience. So again, in this 1 hour conversation, and that's all we have time for today is 1 hour, unfortunately, we'll hear from 4 of our volunteer coaches. I will introduce them, and then we will leave the last third, last 20 minutes of the hour for questions from the audience. You folks, the audience will be able to submit questions via the chat feature. So I'm just going to assume everyone's on this Teams electronic platform sort of thing. And there's a chat feature and you can pop your questions in there. We've got a behind the scenes moderator, Shane Brown. So he is going to make sure that you folks get it the right way around. So welcome everyone. And it's St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day to folks. All right, so I'm only going to briefly introduce our volunteer coaches because we want to leave as much time as we can for the conversation, which is why we're here today. But if you want to know more about the Social Work Professional Support Service, if you want to know more about our volunteer coaches, I think we stand at about 50 volunteer coaches. And again, they come from across the UK. So we have coaches from Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and England. So you're spoilt for choice if you want to book a coaching session with a volunteer coach. But again, if you want to know more, Shane Brown, again, he's our behind the scenes moderator here. Hopefully he can put in a link to the BASW site where you can click on about the professional support service and learn more about our coaches and the service itself. So I'll leave that to Shane to do. On to our lovely volunteer coaches. Mike, I call him Mike, but Michael, what do you prefer? It's Mike, isn't it?
I much prefer Mike. Yes, it's much more friendly. Whenever I was called Michael, it reminds me of being in trouble. If somebody called me Michael, so I much prefer Mike.
Okay, so Michael Farrel has a background in adult social care, mental health, and practice education. Sue Denmark, you're at the top of my screen. So Sue and Adriana, they both also have a background in adult services. And Lynn Froud is with us as well. She also has a background in adult services and practice education. But again, if you go to the website, their background is actually a lot more extensive and detailed than the brief introduction that I've made here. So feel free again to visit the website and check them out. So I'd like to begin the conversation and asking all of you volunteer coaches some questions about your experience of being coaches with the Social Work Professional Support Service. And I'm just going to throw the question out there. Raise your hand if you want to answer it and get us, started. Don't be shy. What was it that motivated you to volunteer to provide coaching to your peers? I mean, that's a time commitment. It's an emotional commitment. So what motivated you to volunteer for something like this when you're carrying your own caseload, etc.? So I see Adriana, you go ahead.
Well, what motivated me was the fact that I have many years of experience as a social worker, and I would have loved at times to have that peer support, maybe more. And looking at the general circumstances with all the changes and challenges due to the COVID-19 and the changes in work patterns and having to work from home, I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to make a difference.
Anyone else? I think that's absolutely right. It seems to, as social workers, we have almost like compassion built into our DNA. So I think Sue, I think your hand went up, and then Lynn, and then Mike.
Yeah, what brought to mind when COVID came on the scene was very much it was something that I attended very early on in my social work career. Was that we had an away day, and we had to do this exercise, and it was quite complicated, involving putting ropes over people and passing it down a line and things like that. And of course, we never succeeded in the time limit. And the learning from that was the people who were running it said that actually social care workers always try to do it, even though it's impossible to do within the time limit. And social workers really never give up, but often they'll put themselves at sort of under great stress because they just want to do what's asked and they want to do the very best. Whereas in other sectors, the private sector, they just said, can't do it, we haven't got the resources. And I was just very aware that this was, that you could see what was happening in health, but actually very little was being said in social work about the pressure social workers were under. And so I just felt at that time, that's when social workers really did need some space and time to talk about what was happening.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think you made some really good points, and the heart of this conversation is about our focus on our social work peers, because oftentimes we are forgotten about. Oftentimes there's this default assumption that we should hold and contain and take care of everyone. And again, this is what we do as social workers. But when we have our peers coming to us to say, whoa, wait a minute, how am I contained? What can you do for me? I think that really speaks to the heart of the service. Lynn, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. I think when I first read about becoming a volunteer coach, it kind of ignited this kind of excitement in me. I've always been excited by social work, and I think in our busy complex day-to-day work, it's difficult sometimes to focus on the growth and how to thrive in that complexity. So for me, it was an opportunity to be able to do something outside of that work, supporting others to figure out what's worked and what's not worked, and setting the stage for more confident and assertive professional practice. And I also get a lot out of working with people and empowering people to recognise their own abilities. And I think it's very powerful to hear themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is sort of we don't want to operate from a deficit model. We don't want to use a deficit model. So it's that real solution focused, person centered model that we bring to our work as social workers, but also to the coaching role. So that's really helpful that you said that, Lynn. Mike, what are your views on this? Why did you come into be a volunteer to coach your peers?
Thank you. Really echoing what my fellow coaches have said so far. For me, I think at the start of the pandemic, I also joined the BASW Human Rights Forum, and during the course of our monthly discussions, it was clear the fact that, as well as looking at human rights practice, social work practice, there was a huge issues around the pandemic and the impact it's having on people's working lives, and the challenges that working, outside the office environments, remotely, communications, threw up a whole lot of issues during the course of those meetings. And then I noticed, I think a notice came through for one of your workshops, Lisa, and I attended it. And like other people said, it absolutely was a revelation. It really opened up my eyes to think, well, from what I'm hearing from the people on the forum and what the service offers, I thought, yes, it's really something that sounds really positive and really a good way of moving forward. And I thought, well, I'd like to, if I can, contribute something towards it to move it forward.
Right. So I think Adriana wanted to jump back in there, because Adriana, actually, you touched on that idea as well of giving back.
I just really want to add that I also really loved the idea of a professional support service and the peer support coaching, because to me it was touching on feeding a positive work culture, and that support between the social workers who not all the time have the time to support each other. So yeah, developing that positive culture of supporting each other, promoting that more.
Can I actually wrap up this question with a follow-up question to what you just said, Adriana? Is it, in fact, and any of you can respond to this, is it the fact that social workers don't have time, as you said, to look for that support, or is it the case that social workers don't feel that they should, right? That they should have support? Anybody, what's your comment on that? Adriana, you can certainly respond directly to that, and then
that question really in line with what I was trying to say earlier on. It is on one side no time, but then on the other side it's perhaps that culture of, well, I have to be resilient and just get on with it. But behind every social worker, it's a human being as well. And that's why I use the word positive culture in the profession, because I think it's important to promote the positiveness of the peer support, and helping the ones that are helping others, and the needs they have for help, not being. It's a very fine borderline between going into a negative, well, maybe you are weak. Are you weak? That you are not resilient enough. It's not about that. being vulnerable is a very important thing for in the profession.
Right. Thank you. Lynn wants to jump in on that one. So Lynn,
Yeah,
what's your thoughts on that?
I'll just be really quick because, yeah, I absolutely agree with what Adriana's kind of said. And I think as well that in my experience, I think people do feel a lack of confidence to be able to say I'm struggling or I don't understand why I'm struggling. And I think the service supports their practitioners articulate their emotions. We can support practitioners work through that so that they can actually put their feelings into a framework and understand why they're feeling certain ways. So I think, especially with COVID and the trauma that comes with COVID and the pandemic that we've, everybody's worked through. So yes, I just wanted to kind of jump in there to say that.
And that's perfect, because that's a great segue really into my next question to all of you. And that question is, when you are offering coaching, and we offer you the 1 hour coaching sessions, what issues have come up so far during those sessions? So remember, we started this service at the height of the pandemic. Now we're kind of trying to figure out, are we easing our way out of the pandemic? What are the issues are coming up? Did these issues exist before the pandemic, etc.? So, okay, Lynn, your hand went back up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the sessions I've had, surprisingly, have been around work balance, home and work-life balance and career pathways. I've had a lot of discussion with people who are wanting advice or just some coaching around where to next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I similarly, I've had those same kind of conversations, and I also think as time has gone on, I've had more conversations about the changes in people's jobs or roles within organisations and structural changes that have been made. Sometimes people have just, they've just been put upon a social worker to fit into different teams or to be moved to different areas, different work patterns, and that's sort of gradually increased those kind of issues. So I think as the system reacted and started to change, there wasn't the consultation that maybe might have taken place in normal times. And I think that has then promoted people to think about, do I want to be here or do I want to look for something else? And there's been quite a wide range of people saying, I just want another job, but out of this particular team, to people saying, maybe I could do something different. And actually identifying, they've usually got something that they've got in mind, but it's just through that process, getting it out, saying it out loud, and then starting to put something together about how they might move forward.
Yeah, indeed. Mike, what are your thoughts on that? Because again, what Lynn and Sue have just said really focuses on those career moves. Do I still want to do this position? Where's my life going? But there's some other very, very live issues that our volunteer coaches are hearing from our peers.
Yes, I confess the conversations I've had have been quite wide and varied. I've had conversations with people who regard us as safe, confidential and knowledgeable service. So one of the conversations I recall having was somebody who was had been off work with stress-related issues. I was due to go back to see occupational health, but perceptions of occupational health is part of the establishment, part of the authority, whose main objective is really to get somebody back into work, whereby we were able to listen to, be non-judgmental, listen, allow the person the opportunity to think, to express their thoughts and to clarify some of their objectives in terms of moving forward. So I think that's a great credibility. And then I've had other people who had issues around confidence issues or issues related to the family life, which is impacting on their working life. So like everybody else, no two conversations are the same. Right. Literally, when you get a referral, it is literally what the person has to tell us and work with us.
Okay, right. Anyone else? Because what we do see is that I think once our peers books a session with you folks, and they really understand, wow, this is a confidential space. It has nothing, we have no connection to their workplace whatsoever. And it's a reflective space, because as social workers, we're so busy and we don't have time to think. Before the pandemic, as you all know, if you drove to work, that was your thinking space. You know, if you had a 20-minute commute or a 40-minute commute, you put on some music or, you know, one of those books that they read out loud, and it gave you that settling in space to get your head in a place where you could deal with the pressures once you hit the front door of your work. So we offer that safe, confidential, as Mike said, non-judgmental space where people can bring all manner of things to us. And as coaches who are trained to actively listen, we don't give advice, although it's tempting, isn't it, Adriana, to resist giving advice because we're social workers. So we have to, you know, walk that line of being a coach, being a social worker. Do I give advice? Do I hold back? You know, that sort of thing. It's that juggling, isn't it?
Yes.
Indeed.
I can add just a little bit with my experience with coaching during the lockdown, and then it kind of changed. There were many times when listening, I realized that was emotional dysregulation there, emotions out of control, issues of isolation that then drove to conflict, and you know, and then coping mechanisms old coping mechanisms or unhealthy coping mechanisms that the social worker were unhappy with. So just having that discussion, acknowledging that, you know, what comes from fear and what comes from actually being grounded was very, very useful. And another thing that came up in my coaching session was that often social workers are, you know, because of the busyness of the profession and all the challenges, are getting focused mainly on the job at hand, and it's quite refreshing for them to have the space together with someone else to reflect on the fact, to realize that, hang on, I have a profession, you know, to look into the big picture, to look into the professional values, into the values of their professionalism, which then it's very empowering and opening new horizons.
And as you said earlier, behind every social worker, there's a human being. I think that's just such a profound statement and observation to make. But let's segue into the next question. But before I do that, I want to just make a point that the social work professional support service is for qualified social workers at every level of an organization. So we get calls, do we not, from service managers, from heads of service, from team managers, from senior practitioners, from newly qualified social workers. So this service really reflects who they are, and you folks actually hold those senior management, team manager, senior practitioner roles yourselves. So when we have our peers looking at your profiles and trying to match themselves, like, oh, that person is from Scotland, or that person is from Wales or England, and that person is in adult services or children's services, and that person is, you know, a senior manager at the strategic level or a manager at the operational level. We've got enough coaches where they can make that match and they can see themselves in you. So I just wanted to point that out to the audience, that we are a service for, you know, everyone from top to bottom of the profession. Let's go on to the next question, however. To all of you, in your experience, and we may have touched on this a little bit, what's the value social workers place on talking to another social worker that supports the evidence base for peer coaching? So there's evidence out there saying, you know, peer coaching does this, and there's that value that we place on it. So what's the value social workers place on talking to another social worker that supports the evidence base? So anyone start that response off?
I think one of oh, sorry, Mike.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to say from my one of the conversations I've had, as I mentioned earlier, is that actually somebody actually comes to us directly because we are social workers. We do have an insight into the roles and the responsibilities and the workload pressures that social workers we carry around with us on a daily basis. So we have that unique insight, if I may say so, into the job. You know, specifically, you could talk to a counsellor. I'm not degrading counsellors, but you know, who deal with a multitude of problems. The beauty of this is that you're talking to a fellow social work professional who has the knowledge, who has the skills to hopefully make a difference, to make you feel, you know, the opportunity to listen and reflect.
Yes, Sue, thank you, Mike, for that. I think that's absolutely right. We're seeing that sort of feedback. Sue, what were you going to say?
I think one of the comments that I really appreciated at the end of a coaching session was somebody said, oh, it was great not to have to repeat and tell you and explain actually everything that was going on, because you just got it, because you knew the background. Obviously, I didn't know the background to that particular person, but I knew what social work was like, and I knew the kind of where the pressures were coming from. I could understand that. I've kind of experienced similar things in the past. I know other people have. It was just not having to explain the story again, so people could start from I think a bit of a deeper place. You know, they weren't descriptive. It was very much, this is how I feel, rather than this is, you know, this is what's happening. This is how my team is structured. It was very much, this is what's going on in my head and my heart at the moment. And that was really good for getting the conversation going and making really good use of that time, that hour.
Good. That's a really excellent point, that because we are in the same profession, we as coaches likely have come up against the pressures that the people calling us have come up against. We can start from a deeper place. We can actually have the conversation without having to put all of the context around it, or the framework around it, or the window dressing around it. It's like, I'm a social worker. We speak a common language, and we start from that common language, and we go deeper and deeper into the conversation. And it's amazing, isn't it, what 1 hour can accomplish. And of course, as we know in the social work professional support service, people who contact us have the option of 3 1-hour sessions. They're free sessions. So it's a valuable service. And again, going into our 2nd year, we're very, very proud of what we're doing. But yeah, those deep conversations. Lynn, what is your thinking on that?
Yeah, I don't think I've got a great deal to add, actually, because I think Sue and Mike and yourself have kind of covered what I was going to make comment on. I think, but yeah, I think absolutely, we're all in the same boat, but we're all experiencing different storms or different journeys. So if we know the mechanisms of the boat, then we can try and get there quicker in understanding what that storm is like for that person. And then that helps. I mean, well-being is such a live issue at the moment, and that bounce back ability and resilience for the workforce, that I think that underpins that kind of need for peer-to-peer support, like the professional support service.
Yeah, I like the metaphor of the boat. I can't swim, but I still like the metaphor of the boat. Yeah. You know, are you on like a yacht? Are you on a dinghy? Are you on a schooner? Are you, the boat is the boat is the boat. And the person in that boat is us and our peers. And so it's not necessarily navigating that boat, but it's navigating the issues that we bring into that space. So we know the narrative broadly of what social work is about. Adriana.
I only just want to add in the same topic the importance of shared professional values and how much that can contribute in positive motivation and problem solving in, you know, in any coaching session. Having the shared professional values, like, okay, we are all in the boat, we know what the boat is about, we are on the boat, why are we on the boat? And that is also very important.
Yeah.
Why are we on that boat?
Yeah.
I really like that one. Yeah. You know, really good stuff. And I think it gives a pretty good view of again, your expertise as volunteer coaches, because we draw on a wealth of knowledge. And when our peers come to us looking for that, how would you say, that compassion, that recognition, they're looking to be recognized. They're human beings, but they're social workers as well, and we can recognize, you know, we can recognize them, the human being behind that role. Let's go on to the last question, and that's going to take us to opening it up to the audience for questions. But the last one, what is the significance? And again, this may piggyback on what we've already said, but what is the significance of peer coaching in relation to self-care? Sue talked about well-being. So in relation to self-care and how critical this is to longer-term emotional health, job effectiveness, and satisfaction. I'm going to repeat that because it's a really long question. So what's the significance of peer coaching in relation to self-care? And how critical is self-care to longer-term emotional health, job effectiveness, and satisfaction? Anybody jump in there.
I think it's something about not being alone. You're not working in isolation. It's about supporting accountability, professional judgment, that understanding of moral trauma that everybody, you know, especially that COVID has kind of brought with it. And that reflective space and that permission and development of reflective practice and feeling valued.
You said something there, Lynn, and maybe Adriana, you can answer it because your hand went up. But this, how would you say, this being wounded, this moral trauma? It's something that as social workers that we really are not really unpacking. Now, in our sessions, we do get some very honest and deep conversations, but are we wounded? Do we come to these sessions wounded? So Adriana.
Kind of the idea went away, but I will try myself.
Sorry about that.
So, no worries. That's why I reacted spontaneously. I think there was a general trauma effect for everyone with, you know, that sense of powerlessness in front of changes and challenges and isolation, lack of interaction, and our nervous system just changed or slowed down. Especially during the lockdown, during the pandemic, I think it was very important in the coaching session to have that sense of connection, but also by sharing the space and you know, mirroring the emotions it was increasing the self-awareness of the person. Well, okay, so for example, I am reacting this way, or I have this coping mechanism that's not my normal self. So you know, so it was that self-awareness that I think it brought a value for the social workers I've been doing coaching with, and then ability to explore more into that emotional regulation and what's the normal state and what is a little bit of a powerlessness reaction.
I think that's powerful what you said. Mike, maybe you can, from your experience as well, speak to that, because Adriana was talking about something quite profound. Our COVID and the stress and the trauma, our nervous system has changed. Now, I think there's a lot behind that, because we have a couple of coaches who are into forensic social work, if you will, the brain, how the brain works and operates in the field of social work and the trauma that we see in our service users, etc. Nervous system changing? What does that mean to you, Mike?
Okay.
Well,
Oh, sorry, Adriana. Let's see what Mike thinks about that, and then we'll come back to you and you can tell us what that means.
I just think the job is in the years I've been involved in the profession has become increasingly complex and demanding. I don't think that as a ex-lead practitioner, the focus continuously was about business turnover, giving little opportunity to give people time to reflect, to listen, to learn, because of the pressures put on us in terms of the demands, in terms of turnover, and continuous sort of, addressing it around the business model as opposed to a sort of social care, allowing time for people. So I think COVID, has had the sort of impact has been even greater, because a lot of the support services, that informal support services, i.e., grabbing a cup of tea and having a quick chat for 5 minutes around the coffee table or whatever, those opportunities were very much lost during the pandemic because of obviously everyone was remotely working, and I know a number of authorities are continuing to remotely work as well. So I think that's new. So suddenly, I'd say the fact that that the impact that it's had has made people, I wouldn't necessarily say the nervous system has necessarily changed. I think, yes, there's been a lot more anxiety, a lot more challenges and a lot more pressures, which adding to the profession, which is already, as we know, a very challenging, very demanding, emotionally, physically, spiritually demanding job anyway. So I think everything's just exasperated, COVID exasperated what was already in the system.
Okay. I wonder if that's what you meant, Adriana. That's a really interesting response, Mike. Is that what you meant, Adriana, or did you mean something, really neurological, that our nervous system because of COVID has changed?
Yeah, I meant that because of the perceived powerlessness brought by all the changes and challenges of the pandemic, that is sort of cultural trauma, and I'm not referring here to cultural nuances, but it's in the entire culture. So a trauma at many levels, and in the social work profession, if you take a unique social worker, that's a person as well as a family that also is experiencing a perceived powerlessness because of changes of environment, of everything. That perceived powerlessness is basically activating our survival brain. So then we go into fight, flight, freeze, dissociate. It's activating automatic coping mechanisms to the perceived threat. So, in just by acknowledging that perceived powerlessness and actually trying to untangle it into to say, well, actually, it's just a perceived powerlessness, and my true values, the reality around is not really that bad. That can build a lot of resilience. So that was one of the principles I worked with in my coaching sessions quite often.
Great, thank you. Actually, Sue, very quickly, because it's time to open it up to the audience, but very quickly, please.
Just very briefly, I wanted to say that I guess some people might wonder why you would want to volunteer to be a coach. And I think one of the joys is, for me, it's a real joy, is that we also get space. You know, as social workers in the past, we haven't had lots of space to talk about things and explore, but we actually get space. It's really lovely to spend an hour with somebody. It's joyful. You know, and sometimes it's tearful, sometimes it's emotional, but actually it's really joyful to have an hour with somebody. Most of my has been with catching conversations with colleagues over the photocopier, or, you know, in the kitchen or whatever, but to speak with somebody in depth for an hour is a joy.
Very good. I think that's a really wonderful comment to leave our conversation on, and to open it up to questions. And so I know, again, that Shane is in the background taking questions. So I'm going to open up the screen, and if questions come in, folks, I will direct them to you, or I can answer them myself as well. So let's see. We've got 15 questions. So let me see if I can get around to most of them. Let's see. Oh, so someone's saying that Social Work England now, and great question actually, because this is new from Social Work England, now requires peer reflection as part of our CPD. The question is, do you have any tips on effective ways of peer reflection? Anybody, in any interesting ways of getting that criteria met that Social Work England has put out, peer reflection? Anyone? Adriana?
Reflective supervision and self-supervision. There are very good ways, and I guess a coaching session can be a peer reflection.
Oh, good point.
I don't see why not.
Yeah. Anyone else and wants to answer that question, or shall we move on to the next one? But I think you're right. Supervision, coming into the coaching session, yes. Okay, so let's go to the next comment question. I have always valued peer-to-peer support, especially during supervision. However, of lately, we see the movement of social workers and the lack of supervision with NQSWs, especially when confronted with ethical dilemmas within services, especially within mental health. How can newly qualified social workers navigate this going forward in terms of service, patients? And that was a long comment with the question at the end. So we have these ethical dilemmas. Newly qualified social workers especially are trying to navigate the system. And, you know, how can the lack of supervision be turned into something that helps them to navigate when they come to, let's say, a coaching session? Anyone? Sue?
I think there's something there about, and I think coaching sets the pattern really about trying establishing a space for yourself. So I think that you have to kind of put that as almost as a given, you know, that is something that's unmovable, of making some time. You might have to shift the time, but at least you've got that space at a certain time every so often to be able to do it. And I think it's got to be at the front, really. It's got to be like you know, like when you're going on a long journey, it's got to be there that you've got to do all your, you know, check your tire pressure, make sure your windscreen wipers work and all those kind of things. Like
Yeah.
you have to build in to your routine almost that kind of time to have that space to then have some peer-to-peer support, get together with other colleagues, maybe colleagues that you don't necessarily work closely with. I just think it's really helpful.
Okay, and yeah, sorry, Adriana, quickly, and then I want to go to sort of an interesting question that was put out by one of the audience members. Go ahead, Adriana.
I want to take a lot of time. So I had several new qualified social workers that came in coaching sessions feeling stuck, feeling not motivated, not supported. And I feel that actually presenting to them the hidden legacy of our profession and saying, right, come into the circle, this is how we are, you know, you put all this effort in getting to this profession, now it's going to be a piece of cake. So it's about supporting that resilience and reinforcing the values for the profession and that power of the hidden legacy of the profession.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for that response. This I want to read part of this out, and I'll say to the audience member who wrote it, absolutely, please contact us offline if you have any ideas of service improvement or any ideas of partnership or any ideas of whatever. It's a really interesting question. So we have someone who works, who is BASW neurodiverse, so neurodiverse social workers. I've never heard that term before. I think it's brilliant. I want to know more about it immediately. So she asked, is neurodiversity considered? I don't know what that is. Frankly, do any of you know what I mean, I can probably make a guess, but I think I'd muck it up. Lynn, do you have any idea what neurodiversity is? And I encourage this audience member to, again, contact us offline so that we can have a bigger conversation about this. So, Lynn.
So my understanding of neurodiversity for in the workforce is to ensure that needs are met, so that people are welcomed into an environment where they can thrive, no matter what their additional needs may be. And that could be, you know, the Equality Act covers like dyslexia, for instance, or anything, any other neurodiversity that makes you different, as that there is a difference in you, in the way that you process information and the way that you work. So it's about being able to recognise that and having those honest conversations with that professional as to how we can make reasonable adjustments and that kind of thing. So that's my understanding from some work that I've done very recently with a colleague.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you for the explanation. And I think that's something that as coaches, we hear clearly about, we know about, what we don't call it necessarily neurodiversity. So I certainly need to do some research on that. So thank you for that question. Then we have another one. I'm sorry, go ahead, Mike, very quickly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm aware there is a BASW group, a neurodiverse social work group.
Yeah, this person is from that group, I believe.
Oh, that's from the group, I was going to say, because I know they have been doing some good recently publicity and getting information about the level of need around neurodiverse social workers. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Again, I've learned something new and I will research that. The next question says, we appear to be referencing the impact of vicarious trauma. What research is available on this that coaches can draw on? And the audience member, we talked about this when we first established or launched the Social Work Professional Support Service. And we have a, how would you say, a researcher. I can't remember which university she's from, but she actually is doing her doctoral research on vicarious trauma. And I'm happy to, well, her name is Sean, and that's S-I-A-N, Sean Ian, E-Y-O-N-Jones, Sean Ian Jones. And I believe she might still be doing this research. So she can certainly, again, offline, if you contact us, I'm happy to give some details on that. Next question. Oh, actually, this is quite long. Let's see. Whoa. Okay. Okay, I think this is worth reading out. It's quite long, and I think it's probably maybe an observation more than anything else. I'm a BASW member, and I'm a social worker for 16 years, and I've been a social work manager for the last 5 years in the UK. I've been a teacher and trainer for Foundation and now a trainer in a company teaching program to eliminate stressors at work and in personal lives, and I guess to look at well-being. I'm keen to become a volunteer coach. Yay! Okay, to coach my peers in social work. The reason is that I've been able to overcome challenges in my social work career and develop the kind of knowledge and skills on how to do this. I want to translate this for my peers across the board. I really want to support my peers, help them empower themselves. So she has 3 questions. I'm sorry, I said, I'm not sure, but let me see who this came from here. Anonymous, I don't know if it's a she or he, so sorry about the pronouns there. My apologies. 3 questions. How can I go about this becoming a volunteer coach, and can I start doing this online? So again, contact us offline and we can give you some details on that. Number 2, do I need a certification for coaching to do this? No. We train and induct our coaches, but many coaches do come to us with certification. 3, are there any benefits I could expect from this coaching experience for me? Yeah, helping people, the benefit of being valued, the benefit of being affording someone that safe and reflective space. That seems to be a benefit for me, is giving back. Let's see. Yeah, so that's the response.
Just point out the fact there's 4 coaches here. Say, Mona Lisa, there are 4 coaches here. All of us sort of expressing how positive we have got out of it as well. So it's not just one way. We gain as well as coaches. We gain a lot of knowledge and insight around ourselves and around our own practice, and helps us question and value and question our own judgment. So certainly from my point of view, as one of the volunteer coach, I learn a great deal myself from each and every session that we do. So in terms of learning and knowledge, your learning and knowledge as a coach will considerably increase your practice as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. Good point. Let's go on to the next question, because I want to give the audience time to be heard. This is from another audience member. I'm curious about the reasons or the themes for practitioners making a choice to come to your service instead of, for example, using a service or a system in their own organization. We kind of touched on that, didn't we? Is it because many don't have this kind of support for them in their own workplace, or is it more linked to your independence? I think it's both. That's my short answer to that question. A lot of organizations, some organizations are starting to focus very seriously on well-being, but it's still attached to the organization. It's not necessarily, that neutral, confidential, safe space. And so people come to us because we are independent. We do not report back to the organization. So that's my quick response. Anything from the coaches?
Yeah, I think as well, it makes it's got linked into the previous question as well about the benefits. So we're independent, so I think there is that, but it also means that we can take back, if you like, things into our organisation which will help that organisation. I don't know whether that was appropriate for that stage of the question. It was just something that came into my mind as you were talking.
Yeah. Thanks for that. We've got a question from a second-year social work apprentice. They say, as a second-year social work apprentice during the pandemic, is there any advice you can give around building resilience, stroke work-life, uni-work balance from the learning you have reflected on from the social workers you have supported? So advice around building resilience. Again, we touched on that, didn't we, guys? We touched on resilience, but we didn't say, what is resilience? What does resilience look like? Resilience looks different for different people. There are tools out there. In fact, BASW, I believe, published the toolkit a couple of years ago. I don't want to get the name wrong, but again, if you go offline, we can send you information about building resilience. There's also a tool called the SWORD tool, and coaches, you guys will remember we talked about this in supervision, didn't we? And it focuses quite a lot. The R is for resilience, so it focuses quite a lot on that. So if you go offline, whoever submitted the question, I'm happy to signpost you to those resources on resilience.
Can I say just quickly, the BASW tool is an excellent resource.
It is, yeah, it's very, very good. Okay, then we have, Is this service something that you would use as a one-off when having a particular struggle, or one that you would use on a regular basis? Excellent question. Excellent question. Coaches, we see it all, don't we? So Lynn, what do we see? Is it one-off? Is it something that we use on an ongoing basis? What do, how do people use the service?
I think it's a mix. It's very varied, so it may be that just a one-off, maybe just all that person needs, or they may want to rebook sessions with the same coach. I think you get up to 3 sessions, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. But then again, I mean, I've had a conversation with somebody who I was talking to about, actually, that's my area of expertise. Perhaps he wanted to book another session with another coach who might be able to help you with that bit. So I kind of think it's a variety. I think it's mixed, very mixed.
It is. And that really almost takes us to the end. We have time for me to read out one more question. Make sure I get this right. Do you find that social workers have received a negative response initially from their own employees prior to I think I understand what that means. So do you find that social workers have received a negative response initially from their own employees or employers prior to contacting us? So in other words, what's the issue that they contact us about? Have they been ignored by their organization? If they need help and they need support, has the organization not supported them, and do they come to us? That's how I'm interpreting that question. So any comments? Again, we've got about 4 minutes. Do any of you find, Mike, so do you find that social workers have received a negative response prior to coming to us?
Well, certainly the people I've coached so far, I think they don't necessarily, with the issues they raise, they don't necessarily feel comfortable talking to the organisation about them. So a lot of them have internalised these issues and sort of question themselves. So at least when they come to us, they have the opportunity to, say, I don't want to discuss this, or I'm scared of discussing this with my employer, and it gives them opportunity to sort of, share their discussions, their anxieties, in a safe, neutral, secure, confidential space.
Okay. Great. I'm going to put one more comment in here, and then we have to kind of close it off. One more comment from an audience. As a social worker in the NHS, we love the NHS, there's little to no peer-to-peer support or reflective supervision available. What would the coaches recommend to change or develop this type of support in NHS as we move forward with integration, as at present things still do not seem to be fairly integrated for social work colleagues in the health sector? Brilliant question. We've been talking about those social workers, our colleagues who are on the periphery, if you will, of the profession. So they may be in hospitals, they may be in schools, they may be in an early help team, but they're not necessarily getting that similar peer-to-peer support that they may receive if they're in a regular organizational social work team, frontline team, long-term team, adoption, fostering, etc. So who wants to tackle that? Again, what do you guys recommend to develop that kind of support in the NHS? I think that's a question that BASW can answer. We can take that offline. But any quick thoughts? You've got 2 minutes. Coaches?
There's just a quick one. In our area, we health actually in one of the trusts, they have their own principal social worker who is a social worker. So they link in with other principal social workers and create forums, etc. I don't know whether that's helpful.
Yeah, I think again, it is. I think it's about a little research, do a little exploration. Again, taking it offline. BASW can certainly answer that question quite directly. You see the link on the screen. So write that link down, cut and paste it, save it. And you can contact, again, the professional support service, and we can do a bit more research on that with you or for you. I'm going to leave it at that. If there's no other questions, thank you guys so much to our volunteer coaches for doing this. And thank you really for the audience. I mean, we had really good questions here. And I think those questions went exactly to the heart of what it is that we do. So once again, thanks a lot. We'll bring Shane back as the behind the scenes moderator. And if there's no more question, have a great evening, afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you.